All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about a pretty wild diplomatic showdown at the United Nations. Usually the world of international relations is, well, it's super formal, right? Everything's carefully scripted, but every once in a while, the gloves come off. And that's exactly what we're going to break down today. What went down when India and Switzerland faced off, why it got so heated, and, most importantly, what it tells us about some big changes happening in global politics. And just listen to the language here. Surprising, shallow, and ill-informed. I mean, wow. These are not the words you expect to hear thrown around between countries at a formal UN meeting. It's just not how things are done. So the big question is, what on earth could provoke a response that fiery? Well, that's exactly what we're about to find out. Okay, so to really get what's going on, we have to set the scene. We're in Geneva at the United Nations Human Rights Council, the UNHRC. Now, you gotta understand, this is like the big leagues of global human rights talk. It's a place where every single word is carefully chosen, every statement is deliberate, and any kind of disagreement, that stuff usually happens way behind closed doors. And the timing? The timing adds a whole other layer to this. See, it wasn't just some random meeting. It was the 60th session, and get this, Switzerland was holding the presidency. Now, that's a big deal. It means their words carry extra weight, but it also means they're supposed to be extra diplomatic. And that's exactly why what they said and how India fired back is just so incredible. So who started it? Who fired the first shot in this whole thing? Well, it all kicked off with a formal statement from Switzerland. It was part of this regular review process where they make recommendations to different countries. And yep, you guessed it, India was on their list. So let's break down what they actually said. Switzerland's recommendations were for India to do more to protect minorities and to make sure freedom of expression and the media were being upheld. Now, on its own, that sounds kind of standard for these kinds of meetings, right? But the real issue, the thing that probably really lit the fuse, was who India was grouped with. We're talking countries like Serbia, Syria, and Turkey. And that context, that set the stage for a major clapback. All right, so India's on the spot. What do? They could have just given a simple defense or politely disagreed. But no, they didn't do either of those things. Instead, their diplomat, Kshitij Tyagi, came to the mic and delivered something that was, well, it was anything but standard. It was a direct, powerful counterattack that completely flipped the script. And this right here, this was the knockout punch. After calling the Swiss comments blatantly false and telling them to maybe look at their own problems back home, the Indian diplomat ends with this line, offering to help Switzerland. I mean, that's not just a defense. It's a brilliant move to turn the whole thing right back around on them. So you have to ask, right? Was this just some clever wordplay from India? Or was there some real substance to it? When they told Switzerland to look in the mirror and deal with its own issues of racism, systematic discrimination, and xenophobia, what were they actually talking about? Let's dig in. And this really lays it all out, side by side. It's super clear. On one side, you've got Switzerland's concerns about minority rights in India. And on the other, you've got India's comeback, pointing the finger right back at racism and xenophobia in Switzerland. It's a classic, hey, look in the mirror move. The whole point was to ask, are you guys really in a position to be lecturing us? So, to get what India was getting at, you have to look at what's going on inside Switzerland itself. If you check out the data, you'll see that while it's a mostly Christian country, it also has a pretty significant Muslim minority. We're talking over 5% of the people there. And this mix of religions is right at the heart of the issues India was hinting at. And you can bet India's diplomat had a very specific example in mind. Back in 2009, the Swiss people actually voted to change their constitution to ban the construction of any new minarets. The towers on mosques. This is exactly the kind of thing that critics, not just in other countries, but inside Switzerland too, point to as proof of discrimination against a religious minority. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because this whole thing isn't just a squabble between two nations. It's actually a perfect example of a much bigger shift in how the game of international diplomacy is being played these days, especially around a touchy subject like human rights. And this tactic India used, it actually has a name. The fancy Latin term is tu quo quo, which just means you too. But you and I probably know it better as whataboutism. By bringing up Switzerland's own problems, India wasn't just defending itself. It was making a strategic play to say, hey, you don't have the moral high ground to criticize us. And believe me, it's a move we're seeing more and more on the world stage. And this really brings us to the main point, the big takeaway from all of this. What we're seeing here is a pattern. Big, influential nations in the global south, like India, are getting much more assertive. They're just not willing to sit back and take criticism from Western countries anymore. They're pushing back hard, they're calling out what they see as hypocrisy, and they're basically demanding that if we're going to talk about human rights, it has to be a two-way street. So all of this leads to one final big question. This whole clash in Geneva, it wasn't just about India versus Switzerland, was it? It was about a world that's changing, where the old rules and power dynamics are being challenged right out in the open. And it makes you wonder, is the era of one-sided lectures on human rights finally over? And are we entering a new phase? One that might be more confrontational, sure, but maybe, just maybe, a little more balanced?